Hi, I'm Daniel Holter. I'm a producer-composer based in Seattle, Washington, and I wanted to share some mix tricks that I'm trying today. That got kind of interesting using really just a few microphones and a few interesting techniques in the box to make a small booth sound a bit more exciting than it does naturally on its own. So this is our drum kit, straight drum mics. I think we had a Sony C48 on the kick drum, a couple overhead mics, and I think a 57 or something similar on a room mic in the booth here at London Bridge, which is not the main room, which is this gorgeous, incredible sounding live rock room, brick wall, great acoustics, lots of space, lots of cubic environment to fill up with sound. It gets really exciting and as a legendary sound that you've heard on a whole bunch of records that you know and love. The booth is a really different recording space, smaller, tighter, lower ceilings, a drier sound. And to get excitement out of a space like that, it requires a player who understands internal dynamics, can kind of mix their performance on the kit. Gratefully, we had Sean Lane that we were working with, who understands that in a really special way. This is a song that I'm working on for my company, The License Lab, written by Alex Shaw. And I had Sean on kit playing a pretty basic part that sounds like this. This is with none of our processing on the drums right now. This is a kick mic, two overhead mics, and a room mic. Real simple, subtle stuff. A pair of mics over the center of the kit, a kick mic in front of the kit, and a drum room mic that really, I believe, was the Talkback. I think it was even just an SM57 or something similar stuck in the room. And through some processing, I think we got a really, really interesting drum sound out of just these very few mics. So let's listen to just the overheads for a second, and you can hear kind of what the kit sounds like overall. I'll turn on a couple EQs here. Just doing a little notch filter and a mid-range pull and a little dulling of the top end. And I'm running Soothe on each of these mics using this Matte Cymbals preset, which just gives a nice, it just takes some of that brittle harshness off cymbal mics, particularly in a tighter space like this booth downstairs. I've got those panned out a little bit, not fully wide. And then let's add the kick drum to that. Here's the kick on its own. And here I'm using a trick that I am ripping off from Eric Valentine, who uses this Saturn processor on the mids and highs on a bunch of microphones, a bunch of sources. But on kick in particular, I love what this thing does. You can set the distortion level or the saturation level per band. You can change these crossover frequencies, just affect the parts of the kick drum signal that you want. And I love using it, especially in a small space like this, to accentuate all the ticky-tack top stuff that makes the kick more exciting without, it doesn't sound processed. It just sounds like a hyped up version of the kick drum. I'll show you what I mean here. So this is straight raw right now. And then this is with Saturn turned on. And all I've done is just select, I usually go into this meter and select a frequency that is above this big fundamental. You can see this fundamental popping up here. And I'll drop a frequency split right after that big hump, and then kind of where the mid-range information turns into a lot of the sizzly stuff. And you can change these, depending on your source material, what you're going for in your mix. But then I just select each of these bands on the default setting, warm tape. I just turn this all the way up. So you just crank that, select the top end, crank this, and you end up with this exciting kick drum sound that sounds naturally hypey as opposed to a whole bunch of process stuff, to my ears anyway. Again, without and with. Then, just to tighten things up, this gate from Sonox, the Oxford drum gate, is an absolutely spectacular tool. I can't even believe how powerful it is. I literally instantiate the plugin, turn on a preset called Kick Let It Breathe, and I'll play the before and after. Here's the kick without this gate. And you can see on the meter, it's registering a snare above this threshold, but not letting it through. I'll turn this on. And the only tweaking I have to do because it's automatically, it knows it's a kick. I can change this decay, which is different frequency bands. Again, super interesting to be able to accentuate just the decay of that frequency range. Or you can grab this whole thing. I just love how this isolates the kick in a natural way without all the, it just seems like drum gates, there's always a bunch of monkeying around that just messes with the drum sound. This gate to me feels like the most natural drum isolator that I've found yet in plugin form. And I really think it's powerful, especially when you're using just a few mics and you just want to tweak the sustain of an instrument or two, especially in a group setting like a drum set. This has become a really powerful, relied on tool in my toolkit here. So that gives us a nice punchy kick out of that wide open sound that we had. And then I'm doing a very minimal EQ just to add a touch of punch with this dynamic bit at 2K on the FabFilter EQ. And I'm pulling just a little bit of mud at 120. Here's without. Here's with. Again, fairly subtle kind of finishing stuff. And then on the drum room mic, which again was just a basic, I believe a 57, we were using it for Talkback in the room. One of my favorite tools for bringing up the level and adding some excitement to random room sounds like that is this Devil Lock from Sound Toys. Here it is with the Devil Lock. It adds compression and trashiness to the whole thing, brings up the low end, the low level information. And I've got it set to be blended in at about 60%. You could go the whole way on this because there's not much original signal even happening because the level is so low, but I just backed it off a bit. And then there was this little resonance happening in the hi-hat after this compressor Devil Lock trash machine. I just wanted to get rid of that here. Just that little whistly thing. I usually hate that stuff in especially cymbals. I'm just pulling that out after the fact. These four mics together are sounding pretty good. I may end up accentuating the snare a bit more somehow, but that's not really what I wanted to get into on this. Just, I love the transformative properties of a few mics in a small room and adding some kind of crunchy indie pop vibe to the drums. And then on this drum mix, I added what is becoming a fantastic part of my mix chain is the plugin I did another video for. My first video on YouTube was this Magic Flow from my friend Josh Goodwin. I have been loving this little preset I put together called Drum Bus Sauce. I'm just kind of tweaking it based on what the drum kit is doing. And here it is on this drum mix of these four mics. There's that lovely kind of hyped low end that's always present but not getting in the way. Some compression, some EQ, some dynamic EQ, a little preamp stage. Just adding a little punch to the front end of the circuit. I'm loving this thing, especially in this application. It's been great. And then I thought the drums are sounding a touch clean for this project. I wanted to add a bit of saturation and edge to them. So the Studer 800 from Universal Audio got put on after the Magic Flow. That's doing this. Quite a bit of tape saturation on the way into the stereo mix. Was adding that nice whiffy, fuzzy low end to everything. Might be too much in the context of the finished song, but for right now, it's a lot of fun to work with. So that's our drum sound from just four mics in a small room, pretty dead room. And it got really fun to listen to, really fun to work with. Then to take things to the next level, it was the end of our session together, and I wanted to try some percussion bits, just some flavors, just to see what came of it. And Sean is so creative and so fast, so easy to work with. I just say, run a pass and try some stuff, and I'll go grab some things later. One of the things I like to do to keep things moving along, not get bogged down. I'm not going to have any percussionist overdub, try 10 different passes of, a performance. Is so easy to move things around in the workstation later. This doesn't only help our time and budget considerations, but it just keeps things fresh and the players aren't getting bogged down. We're not getting lost in the minutia of overdubs for an hour at a time, or finding the perfect mic or finding the perfect part. just try some stuff on the mic that's up in the room and mess with it later. I love adding flavors like this, especially to drum performances. So here's a pass that Sean did on percussion, a stereo overhead microphone setup. I believe we had 2 Coles 4038 set up for this. And this is him in the main room at London Bridge. So there's more space around the percussion, which adds a nice, you'll see how that comes into play as I treat some of these signals and blend them in with the main drum mics. So he's trying out some different things that are laying around the kit. A couple metal bits, a couple clicky bits, a couple shaker bits. So he's playing this along with the drums that he played. Switch over to the shaker, move some sticks around. None of this is quite workable yet in the tune, which is why you can see here I edited up to this spot. But here's where he found a little shaker groove that I kept in, which is, standard, just a little shaker accent. But where this got really interesting to my ears is I found these little bits in here that kind of worked on their own as a little percussive accent. So there's this little groove. So I went in and chopped that on the bar. And I didn't do any time correcting on the little bits in between. All that kind of weird glitchy stuff gets really fun when it's in the context of, first of all, the loop kind of tricks your brain into thinking that's what was meant, that's what was intended, all those ghost notes. Here's that little loop bit in the context with the drum set, with the 4 microphones. We can play this section here. I chopped up that bar and put it over the intro. Just from a happenstance little bar while Sean was figuring out the shaker part later in the song. I love the way those are playing against each other. I think it's really interesting and really organic, as opposed to, nothing against the online sample repositories where you can go find a percussion loop and drop it in. This just, nobody's had this before. It's our own thing. We make our own sound out of this as opposed to using someone else's loop to just kind of add on to our drum part. I like this kind of organic record production where you're finding bits inside the bits, turning them way up to make them something they were never even intended to be. And it just makes, I think, for a more magical, organic record production, which is the record that I'm making right now. It's an organic indie pop record. That's the intent. That's the sound we're going for. Then there's this other moment that I thought would make an interesting accent groove right here. While he was figuring out the shaker bits. So I grabbed that as a loop, ran it through Spiff to remove some of the front end of that attack and ended up with this. And added verify to the very first bit of each groove. Just a little slice of verify to add that little tape speed up at the front of each phrase. And again, I don't mind that it's glitching out a little bit. It's not quite right. It's not quite perfect. I think that's a really good thing, especially in the context of the full kit. So I layered that in for the rest of the song, and you can hear here when the whole groove kicks in, how that impacts things with that additional loop percussion coming in. Here it is here. And I love microshift on percussion. Just adding a little stereo-ness to an already stereo image is really fun. That's this. And then this loop gets a little pumpier when you throw the Kush UBK on here. Here's this. Brings up the noise, adds a little interest that I find compelling. Again, on its own, maybe not right. Maybe you want it cleaner. But in the context of the drums, I think that gets really groovy and fun. That's a quick bit on how I like to bring the little bits from a session forward in a project to make a groove and a moment, a musical experience, just a bit more unique. And I hope there's something in there that you can take and add to your records. I'd love to hear what you're working on. If you use any of this stuff, I just wanted to share something fun that I happened across today in the project that I'm working on. So we will talk to you again soon. See ya.